we're having to split the difference between where we're doing worship because the main chapel building where they do worship, one of the air conditioners bit the dust. And so
It's too hot for that.
it's the mornings we could do it. So we do worship in the mornings in there. And then there's another building where it's basically just like this giant concrete slab with a ceilingless, ceiling roof that's just echoey as all get out with a much smaller stage, a much less sophisticated sound system.
Yeah.
And it is hard to keep them wrangled because they're not sitting on like pews that are cushioned. They're sitting on concrete. It's not great.
Gets uncomfortable quick.
But, classic camp experience.
Yeah. If it doesn't kill you, makes you stronger.
That's what we're hoping for, is that vibe. My gosh. Well, hey, welcome to Sunday Plus, and look who I have next to me. It is officially Alex Williams, who is now the co-host of Sunday Plus.
Woo.
This is your first one. I am very excited. So, did you have any apprehension about being on a podcast?
No. So I think after the pandemic, I got so comfortable being on camera, and I worked at a church right out of college that did video announcements.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, I was the worship leader, and I think I was also over like singles ministry or young adults or something. And well, a lot of times if they can't, justify a full-time job for a musician, I had several of these jobs. They would try to find other things for me to do. Yeah. And of course, when you're trying to get a job, you're like, definitely, I can do that for sure. With just making it up, just writing on the resume. Of course, I know how to do that. Of course. But one of the things that I ended up doing, because I told them I knew how to do video editing, which was a stretch, was to help them with the video announcements. And so I thought I would be editing and producing them, but they wanted me to be on the camera. And that was very, very stressful. So that was tough and kind of my first entry into it. But then during the pandemic, when everything was online, I got so much more accustomed to it. So now being recorded is it's like a regular thing. Especially when you're talking to someone, that's much easier.
Yeah.
Staring into a lens is a lonely experience, but talking to someone's easy.
So I wanted to, for those that haven't heard a lot of your backstory, so let's start with a couple of basic things. You went to, everybody knows you went to A&M. You drive a maroon truck. Was that on purpose?
No, it wasn't. So
you are a liar. You absolutely did that on purpose.
It really wasn't. When I went to buy that truck, there was one I was looking at that I saw on the internet and wanted to go get that was gray, and I got there and it was gone. They had sold it. But he's like, I have another one that's just like it, and it was maroon. And I thought, I'm never going to hear the end of this. But at
least you're aware of it.
Well, the one I was trading in before, it was the paint color was vermilion red, and it looked reddish when I bought it, kind of like a dusty southwestern red. But I learned that depending on the time of day, it would be either maroon or, I swear to you, burnt orange. If it were in the sun, it would be burnt orange or maroon. And I was like, this truck is betraying me depending on the time of day. So anyhow, yeah, I didn't do it on purpose, but when it happened, I thought, just lean into it. Here we are.
Love it. So you went to A&M. And what was your major?
Ooh, it changed a lot. We'd have to do a whole podcast on that. I ended with sociology and philosophy.
Sociology and philosophy. Well, that's going to tie in nicely to you being a pastor and stuff.
It worked out well in the long run, but yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life at the time, so I explored many of the majors at A&M.
Hey, there's lots to choose from.
Yeah.
Just dip from this bucket, grab from this bucket. Let's just go nuts. Okay, so then you magically end up in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And how long between A&M and Chicago was there a break?
Just like 2 years. I worked for a little bit in College Station, and then I worked for a church in Temple, Texas for a couple of years, doing music and young adult stuff. That's where I was.
Classic Temple. Speed Trap.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But yeah, then went to Chicago. I wanted to go somewhere. I wanted to live in a big city. I'd lived near, like Austin's. Well, it's big now. It wasn't as much when I was there.
You can get to Austin in about an hour from Temple.
Yeah. Well, I just mean that's where I went to high school in a suburb just outside of Austin. So I'd lived near kind of cities, but I never lived in a big city. And so I only applied to schools that were in huge cities in very different climates. And so, DC, New York, Chicago, that kind of area.
When did you know that like ministry is this is my full time?
I mean, I grew up in the church and I was always active. I did, the youth council when I was a kid, went to annual conference and did all of that stuff and was involved in the youth group and started playing music and leading worship. And I started working in the church when I was 18. And I thought I was going to do music my whole life, but I got to a point kind of after college when I got my first full-time music job where I realized that two things. One, I realized that I kind of peaked musically, that my voice was only good enough to get me to kind of that level of church. And I was like, I can do the leading, I can play, but like singing, I just didn't have the singing chops to really get anything beyond that. And I started to realize that I had so much passion and interest for things in the church outside of kind of my lane, which got me into trouble. It was my first full-time job, and I'm like 22, 23, and I thought I had all the answers because that's how you feel at 22. And so we would sit in staff meetings, and I would have a lot of ideas and opinions and criticisms about things that had nothing to do with my job. And I'm sure everyone's looking at this 22-year-old like, dude, stay in your lane. What are you doing? You don't know anything. So that was tough, but thankfully I had good mentors around me, and they said, this is probably because God's calling you to something, else or just in a different way. It's not only what you're doing right now. Maybe that's why you're feeling this way. So I didn't want to. I'm going to talk about this a lot on Sunday. Our scripture on Sunday is about Moses, and I relate to Moses in my call to ministry more than anyone because Moses didn't want to go. God calls and he's like, no, I can't speak. My brother's great. You should talk to him. And I have an older sister who was in seminary at the time. And I was like, yeah, that's great. Talk to my sister. But just really kind of pushing back and not wanting to do it until realizing through the grace of, God and a lot of good mentors, this is what you want to do. And then once I got into it, I loved it. And I changed my major 100 times when I was an undergrad because I wasn't doing what I wanted. I didn't really care about school. But when I got into seminary, I was like a straight A student, which was never the case in college because I cared. And so it was nice to know that, it wasn't that I was dumb. I just didn't care about my classes in college. So it was really a new kind of world for me when that opened up and never looked back. Just kind of when you know. And once I got into seminary, I was like, oh no, this is definitely. Got into my first preaching class, and I was like, oh, this is what I was born to do. So it became real clear then.
I wanted to kind of lean into the whole thing of you saying you had good mentors. Like I personally think that is because those early 20s, even through your mid 20s, the kind of energy and enthusiasm you have because the world is your oyster and you can just, I've got all the energy in the world to do everything, but your wisdom and your direction are completely chaotic. Like they're still formulating and they're still in like their infancy, so to speak. But you've got all the energy in the world. And so getting good mentors around you, I cannot stress enough how important that is. Like for me, having people to kind of, wrangle me back in when I'm going off the deep end of some crazy idea that I'm like, oh, this is totally going to work. And then somebody without like shutting down that energy, it's just like, let's talk about this a little bit more. And then they talk you out of it and then, or just redirect it. I've had that happen so many times because I will say that I've also had people just shut my energy down. Be like, nope. And then you feel defeated and you're like, well, nothing ever gets done and I'm never going to be able to make a difference. But a good mentor will just re-aim that energy into something that they know you'll succeed in versus watching you or letting you fail intentionally. So I like that. That's good to kind of shout out the mentors. Okay, so you play music. I remember the first time that we were doing some interviews and you were in your office at your previous church and you had guitars and a bass on the wall. And so like, this is just for my own joy here. Tell me, like, when did you start playing guitar? When did you start playing bass? What else do you play? Like, what got you into it?
When I was in elementary school, I always wanted to play drums. And there was a band in elementary school, and so, or it wasn't really a band, it was sort of like intro orchestra or something. The middle school band director came over and tried to help us learn things. And so in fourth grade, all you could play was string instruments. So I played the violin horribly during fourth grade. Then in fifth grade,
Lots
they had a
of
band.
squeaks.
Oh, God, yeah, hot cross buns. That's all we did. But in fifth grade, there was a band, and I thought, yes, I'm going to play percussion. Well, they said, we don't have percussion in elementary school. So I went to the next coolest instrument I could think of, which was the saxophone. But everybody wanted to play saxophone. And so the band director talked to two of us and said, if you will play the baritone horn, because nobody wants to play that, you can, you'll be able to, play in better bands when you get to middle school because nobody wants to do it. So you'll be able to, do a lot more. We were like, all right. So we learned how to play the baritone horn. And I had in a huge case, it's not as big as a tuba, but it's pretty close. And I had my dad got a suitcase dolly that I bungee corded this thing to it. I was really cool at school. And I pulled this baritone horn case on my little furniture dolly to school every day. So then when I got to middle school, the two of us always wanted to play percussion. But the band director was also at the middle school, but he was retiring. But he put us in the intermediate band because they needed baritone horn players. So we got in there, and then he retired, and the new director was there. And so we're going around the room on our first day, an intermediate band. We're the only sixth graders basically in the intermediate band. And they said, what instrument do you play? And we both looked at each other and thought,
drums.
So we both said percussion. And so we made the intermediate band without having to audition for it because we got the recommendation of the previous band director. And I guess the new director thought they were recommending us for percussion. So
that's some shiesty.
It was great. Yeah, I learned how to work the system early on. But we did. So I did percussion through middle school, and then we moved to Texas after middle school. And when I got to high school here, I was playing football and sports and kind of dropped out of band because I started playing music at church, and that's where I picked up drum set instead of just percussion instruments in the band. Started learning how to play the drum set, and then I've started picking up the acoustic guitar because of two reasons. One, I knew that I liked playing music and thought maybe I can do this for the church or for the youth group or whatever. And two, people convinced me that girls would like me better if I could play the guitar. And I thought, as a high school kid, I was like, anything to try to get a date. Yeah. So that's why I tried to lean into it. It didn't work. It wasn't true. But I learned guitar and started playing it that way. I wish I would have taken formal lessons. I just sort of kind of taught myself and learned the chords and went through that. So the technical knowledge in the underground really isn't there. But I played guitar. So that was what I did. I led worship right in college. I worked at the Wesley Foundation and worked in this little town called Rockdale in between Austin and College Station. Leading worship there for 3 years. And I worked at a church in College Station and Temple. And we did summer camps and youth mission trips and all kinds of stuff. We had a little band that went around and played those camps. And it was called Red Letter Noise. It was a horrible name. But we... we thought we were cool. We were not, but it was fun. It was fun to play. So I picked up the bass probably 6 years ago. It was right when COVID hit, or before COVID. We had hired a new worship leader at the church I was at 2 appointments ago, and they didn't have a bass player in the church. Our bass player moved away, and all the musicians were just volunteers in the church. And I'd always wanted to learn the bass. It just seemed like a fun instrument. And I'd always been in the front. I'd always been the worship leader and the lead singer and the guitar player and all that. I learned how to play lead guitar because I'd have to sometimes. And I could fake my way through the, riff for the intro to the Hillsong song or whatever we were doing. But I wanted to learn bass. So I picked it up just as a hobby, not even really for any reason. And then when our bass player quit, I started playing with the band. And it was like I had come home. And I wish I had found the bass years ago because there's no stress to it.
Oh, yeah.
And even with drums, even though you're in the back, everyone knows if the drums are wrong or if they're going too fast or you mess up, everyone can hear it. When you're singing, you got to know all the words. If you're leading, you know all this. You got to do so many things. The bass, nothing. If you play a wrong note, hardly anybody can even hear it. There's no pressure on you. You're in the back. You're just kind of and I was like, I've never had so much fun playing music because there's not even parts you have to learn. Just
bass
make
players
sure you're down
below.
on the down. It's great. So I really found I feel like my calling in music. So I played it with the church and then just kind of played it for fun.
So are we going to come
beyond
in
there, so.
some weeks and catch you on the drum set in the worship center? Just
Man, I haven't played drums in years, so I doubt it. But I filled in a couple of times at a church a few years ago. But no, man, I haven't played in so long. You wouldn't want that.
Well, you got all the practice time in the world. Once you settle in, get a little practice time, show up a little early.
Yeah.
Wait, and make sure you can get your chops back.
We'll see.
All right, so you being the new kid here, what has been kind of a surprising part of this new kid experience compared to any other church? Because there's always going to be you have those people that as you mentioned want to meet you like day one,
Right.
the second they get permission to send you a message and be like, let's get coffee.
Sure.
So and there's all the things that you expect, and every church is going to have different versions of that. But what has been unique to Creekwood that you haven't experienced before?
That's a good question. I mean, every church is unique, and I think the first thing that is the biggest learning curve, or the thing that takes the most time, is just learning the culture, not only of the church, but of the community. And I've learned in different appointments that churches either look like their community, they kind of reflect the culture of it, or they're intentionally different from it. So 2 churches ago, I worked in West Frisco, and we were also I worked at a satellite campus of that main campus up in kind of the Prosper area where it was all growing along 380.
Grace Chapel, right?
Yeah. And I followed the founder of that church plant, and that area was crazy just because everybody was moving in. It was growing like crazy. It was right before PGA moved in. And it was just a field that turned into neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood. And everybody who moved up there was crazy busy, doing 100 different things, high-paced careers. They all moved there for jobs. Nobody was from there. And everybody was kind of running at breakneck speed. And our campus in West Frisco at Grace Avenue really mirrored that. So it was a very busy church doing 1,000 things because that's what the community looked like.
Yeah.
And so that made sense. And when I got there, we had a conversation about what did we want our identity to be. And they talked about what if we modeled what balance and rest look like, since that's what people struggle to find. And so at the church plant campus, we tried to do that. So we were intentionally less busy, and we didn't try to do a million things. And we preached a lot about Sabbath and balance and how to find rest and how to find community, because people were doing 1,000 things and trying to get people to show up to 100 events. When you're a brand new church and people don't have that, well, I've gone to this every year, it made it easier for us. But that's just kind of what I mean. Like, it was even 2 different campuses of the same church taking kind of opposite approaches to meet people where they are, and either, look like their life or model what we're trying to help them find. And both had their advantages and both had their struggles.
Sure.
I mean, neither one of them, was perfect. They both were great, and we learned a lot from each other in those two campuses. But that's one of the things that is always the biggest question when you get there, is not only what is the culture of the church, but what is the culture of the community? Is it homogenous? Especially a church like Creekwood. I mean, we joked about this on Sunday, but Creekwood's located in between multiple communities.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of similarities between them, I'm learning, but there's also differences. Allen and Fairview and Lucas and McKinney and Murphy, I mean, they're all different in their own way. And I think trying to understand and learn what are those differences, how do they show up in the church, and what is the church's culture. And I think that's what makes Creekwood unique in my mind, is just that it's really situated between so many different communities that, if you're at, like First Methodist McKinney, I have several friends who work at First McKinney. They're right in the heart of downtown McKinney, and most of their people live in McKinney. Not all of them, but that's kind of, they're right in downtown. So the culture of the church is tied to the culture of the city because it's right in the middle of it. My first appointment was at First Duncanville, and we were right downtown. And so we'd pray at the city hall meetings, and we'd go to all the school board meetings and be a part of all of that, because the identity of the church was so linked to that single municipality that it was clear what the identity was. And here it just feels like that's a little more complicated because it's between.
Oh, sure. It took me a while. Like I grew up in this kind of North Texas on the kind of northeast corner of the Dallas Metroplex. And like when I came here, it took me a while before I felt like my brain understood just this church is on this crux of like this big but very unique, intersection, and that's like physical and metaphorical intersection.
Sure.
And so it took me a while. So I would say, like, don't be in a hurry to try and figure it out. Let it happen organically. But the easiest thing for me personally was like just letting the people tell me what it was. And eventually you start to stack stories and understandings. And then I was like, okay, I think I kind of get it now. And honestly, spending a lot of time here helps.
For sure. And I'm glad you talked about listening to people and learning from people, because it's, every part of town has like a stereotype or how it's seen from the outside and how it's seen from the inside. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's different. And so it is so helpful to get to hear from people. So we're going to do that soon. We'll be talking about that this Sunday. You can sign up for listening groups. We're going to have listening groups where Pastor Leslie and I are going to go to small groups, existing Sunday school classes, different groups, to try to get to know the church in smaller kind of group settings. And they're for us to listen. So we don't have a big speech prepared. It's mostly for us to go and hear from the people of the church how they see the church, who they are, what they love, what their dreams are, so that we can learn about the church from the church and not just our own perspective of it, or to have it colored by, one or two people kind of giving us their ideas, to try to really understand from the people the nature and hopes and future of the church. So that's a big thing we'll be doing over the next couple of months. So keep an eye out for that.
So the last thing I wanted to talk about for your first Fantastic Sunday Plus is you're coming into a church that, if I'm going to toot our own horn for a second, has a pretty good amount of momentum right now.
Yeah.
And so do you have any hopes that you're bringing with you to try and implement into something that's got some momentum going, and to try and either join that momentum or even accelerate it even more? Or do you have any just general hopes that you want to bring with you to this church?
Sure.
As the church's new leader.
Right. First of all, I mean, it's so exciting, and I'm incredibly thankful for David and all the work that he and all of y'all have done.
Shout out, David.
That's right. To get the church where it is. Coming out of COVID was hard for every church, going through that process and learning what that looks like, and to see the momentum and the growth and the joy that's present here is not true in a lot of our churches in our conference. And most of the times that I've gone into a new appointment, this is the fourth one I think I've gone into, a lot of times I'm coming in where it's either a season of uncertainty. My last appointment I started in 2021, so we were just restarting ministries when I got there, and one of my appointments was a church plant that had just moved to a different building that also wasn't a great fit. So it was a lot of challenges and struggles and question marks. And this is the first time I think I've come into a church that's in that situation where there's a lot of momentum. Things are going great, very stable, steady, in that field. And so that's a joy, and that's fantastic. And when I first heard the news and started talking with David, just more and more about that was really exciting. So I think my first answer to your question is to learn and to see and to witness and to understand. One of the things that I think is really a struggle is when somebody comes in and immediately tries to change everything. And I think there's a balance you have to walk between being true to who you are, but also, it's not my church. And so I'm not going to be doing a David impersonation. I'm going to try to be honest to who I am. And there will be things that Leslie does and that I do that are different just because it's who we are, and we'll have different ideas. And, you want to try to make it your own in ways that you can. but to also understand like things are going well, learn why, understand the traditions, because it's not my church.
Right.
And really trying to understand what is God calling us to do together and what does that look like. So that's where the listening groups come in, and a lot of that. In the beginning of all the appointments I've been to, I really try to just sit back and listen and learn and not do nothing, but to not come in and think I know better or think I've got an idea because I've seen one Sunday or because I did something in one church and it worked, so let's do it here. That's not true. I mean, I know you know that, like, you know, things are contextual and things have seasons. And so I think the first key to that is to understand and get to know the church and to understand what's working and why. If we have momentum, why? What has led to that? How can we keep it going? How can we put our energy behind those things that really are having the biggest impact? And then I think it's to work collaboratively. And I think that's one of the things that's challenging to do. It's core to Methodism. You know, we love small groups, we love committees, we love doing things together. But if you've ever tried to do anything with a group of people, it can get tough if you have a lot of opinions or if you have, you know, not sure what to do. No one wants to make a decision. You don't want to leave people out. Sometimes it's easier to just make a decision and go.
Yeah.
But I think collaborating, you know, getting to know how many wonderful, you know, lay leaders we have and people who have been here from the very start and people who are new and see the church in different ways and the great staff team we have. I think trying to have those conversations and dream together and listen together and try to figure out, okay, if we have momentum, to what end? And that's a struggle I've seen in a lot of churches is there's not really a goal. And it's not that you reach it and you're done, but a lot of times it's just more, bigger, better, more, bigger. And so you never know how to celebrate, you know, achievements. You never really know where you're going and what does that look like. And so I think trying to put, you know, some real tangible ideas behind more short-term things. You know, what are we trying to do this year? What are we trying to do in the next 3 or 4 years? Because sometimes, you know, the perfect can be the enemy of good. And if you're trying to get to the perfect, you can't celebrate when things are good because it can always be better. It can always be more. And so trying to just clarify that, talk about it together and put some goals you can sell and celebrating wins. I feel like we always forget to celebrate the wins and
little victories and
Man, it goes a long way.
deserved little celebrations.
Yeah. So
I'm always a big fan of that. There's almost always something that you can celebrate. And so don't forget to do that, because if you never celebrate the little things, then you're just focused on the big things. I don't know, just kind of makes the whole journey a little less fun.
It does.
All right, well, you heard it here. Got a lot to look forward to. Man, this is big. I think this was episode either 27 or 28
All right.
of Sunday Plus. So we've got a little steam behind us, and I'm excited about the future. Alex, we got a lot of work to do.
That's right.
Let's get to it. Thanks for hanging out with us at Sunday Plus. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks, y'all.